With news that the White House is considering a major shift in strategy in Afghanistan, one that could involve expanding the military role and deploying thousands more troops, there was this in today's Washington Post. Even as it moves to the president, the plan faces resistance from senior administration officials. Inside the White House, those opposed to the plan have begun to refer derisively to the strategy as, quote, McMaster's War, a reference to H.R. McMaster, the president's national security advisor. My own reporting on this story resulted in an aggressive pushback. A senior White House official telling me today that the president is very happy with McMaster and the process that he is leading, and that confidence in McMaster was won by the interagency process he directed, which resulted in the decision to strike Syria. Michael Crowley, I want to start with you because you alluded to these tensions earlier, and I want to know what your reporting is turning up.
Well, you know, there's still some Flynn holdovers in the National Security Council.
Who? Bannon? Who are the Flynn holdovers?
K.T. McFarland came in with Flynn as a Flynn loyalist. I'm not imputing any action or motive to anybody, but I'm pointing out there's some continuing tensions. Steve Bannon, I think, has more of a Michael Flynn worldview than an H.R. McMaster worldview. You know, Sebastian Gorka, who we keep reading is about to be forced out any day now, along with K.T. McFarland. They somehow hang on, and there are a few other like-minded people. And I would say that those people represent, you know, more of a Trumpian worldview, which is that the national security foreign policy establishment has sort of failed, has led America into a series of blunders. They're responsible for the Iraq War. They cheered on Libya, which turned out to be a disaster. And so they think that the experts that everyone on the TV shows and at the Council on Foreign Relations thinks so highly of, like H.R. McMaster, are overrated and don't have great judgment. So it's possible that is that kind of person who's still hanging on the administration, who seems to be gunning for H.R. McMaster, although it's not clear whether there are genuine tensions with the president. I would just, as a closing note, add on the substance of this Afghanistan stuff, the idea that this is McMaster's war seems silly to me. They're talking about sending maybe 5,000 more troops to Afghanistan. It's actually not that large a number. Barack Obama sent 30,000, and this 5,000 would probably be in primarily a training role, whereas Obama's were primarily in a combat role. Dozens of people were dying every month. You know, this idea reflects kind of centrist foreign policy thinking. I don't think it's some, you know, crazy nation-building McMaster plan.
I was at the White House last week for a briefing on this trip they're going on, and I saw this foreign policy team, McMaster, Jared, and Dina Powell, functioning as frankly, one of the more competent displays of governance in this White House so far. Do you think that sort of the decision to toss Bannon from the National Security Council is one that may have led to sort of a ripple effect leading in stories like this coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this is a huge rift. I think there's a Bannon wing in this administration.
Well, you've got someone inside the White House attacking.
But I mean, I think that, but you can see the motives, right? Who comes up with quirky little names for people, right? Globalist Gary, McMaster's War. It's Steve Bannon, okay? And so.
And he has time, right? He's been carved out of a lot of things, right? He's got free time.
Well, I don't know what time he has, but he has the sort of nationalist view that he would like to think that this is Donald Trump's real worldview. The reality is, we don't know what Donald Trump's actual foreign policy worldview is, because he did run on sort of isolationism, and, you know, the Iraq War in hindsight was a huge debacle. I was always against it, whatever. But he also gave people that thrill of sort of nationalist, you know, triumphalist militarism, intervention, being strong. The U.S. isn't strong. We're going to rebuild the military. He sort of sold people on both. He loved the response that he got after the missile strikes in Syria. So you can understand that Steve Bannon is sort of doesn't want to see a mainstreaming of the national
you wrote about
team.
this at length during the campaign.
I did. Look, I think it's important to understand with Trump, he's not an ideas guy. He's an impulses guy. And there's a hierarchy of impulses with Trump, so one takes precedence over the other. But I'd say at the top of that impulse is we don't want to lose.
Right.
And the reality is that in Afghanistan, with just 8,000 American forces there in largely training roles, we were at real risk of losing. What McMaster is proposing, a 3,000 troop increase, is, as Michael said, it's not a huge increase. We're still talking about perhaps 10% of what we had at the height of the surge in Afghanistan. This is just being responsible. But what's also interesting to me is how Bannon's worldview really approximates the most extreme Obamaites. Remember, complete withdrawal from Afghanistan was the Obama administration's idea back in 2012, 2013, until they realized that history wasn't quite going their way and they had to keep a force in place.
But the anecdote that story was based on, Audrey, did happen. Trump did get mad at McMaster for going back to the South Koreans and sort of trying to patch things up. But again, this is after the president himself, who has this very sort of, real estate mogul's view of foreign affairs. How are we getting ripped off? Who's paying for what? I don't want to pay for that. Said, you've got to pay for your own missile defense. And really, my national security source who talked to people in South Korea say that strained the alliance with South Korea, which is critical, really much more than anybody understands. And so you have McMaster trying to sort of smooth things over, and he's getting yelled at because the president feels disrespected.
And you see the ramifications.